Once again, welcome to our Excel formulas and functions class. My name is Jamie. I am a librarian with the Plano Public Library, and we also have Ellen, another Plano Library staff member, who is joining us to help facilitate the chat today. Before we begin with our course content, I do need to let you know about some of the ground rules that we've set up for the program. You will be muted during this class, and we have your video blocked, so you will only see my screen. At the top of your screen, you can find an exit full screen option if you need to get to other things on your computer, including Excel. During the program, you are welcome to ask questions in the chat box. You will see an icon at the bottom of your screen that says chat. Then click on that and it will open the chat box. Chat is set to be seen by library staff only. Please note that any inappropriate comments will cause your immediate removal from today's class. In regards to those questions in the chat, we may answer you in the chat box. We might hold the question to the end of the program, or we might go ahead and ask the question at the time if it is pressing. In the reminder email to the class, there is a link to our Google Drive with the practice spreadsheet. If you would like to follow along during the class, you may, but please keep in mind, it will be difficult to give one-on-one help or troubleshoot during today's class. A recording of this class will be sent out in a few days as well, so if you would like to watch the class and then practice after getting that recording, that is also an option. However, I will try to take it slow in case you are practicing along with me, so thank you in advance for your patience. The goal for our class today is to learn how to use formulas and functions to perform mathematical calculations in Excel. So basically, we are going to set things up so that Excel does a lot of the work for you. You can also use this data to create charts and graphics, but we won't be covering those features in today's class. You can specify mathematical relationships between numbers using formulas, and those formulas are used for simple addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, as well as complex calculations. As I mentioned earlier, there is a link to our Google Drive in the email for the class, and this is where you can get the practice spreadsheet that I will be using. All of the handouts for our computer classes are found in the Adult Learning folder on the Google Drive. You can navigate to the folder for digital skills and then choose the folder for Microsoft Excel formulas and functions. To open the spreadsheet in Excel, you will want to download the spreadsheet directly to your computer, which is what I've done here. If your file downloads with that protected view in it, just click Enable Editing to be able to access all of the functions within that spreadsheet. Let's get started with some of the basics. Like I mentioned earlier, a formula performs calculations or other actions with the data in your worksheet. Functions, on the other hand, are built-in or preset formulas that come with your Excel program. So those functions are like shortcuts. They're code commands for the common calculations done in Excel. It's important that we understand some of the basic information about how those formulas and functions work before we get started. Today, I'm using the desktop client for Microsoft Office 365. If you are using an older version of Excel like 2016, your features may not look exactly the same, but it should be the same basic concepts. If you do run into any issues specific to your Excel program, you can always contact us at the library to set up some one-on-one time to walk through some of the specific issues. All right, each cell, or what these little rectangles are in Excel, has a name called its reference. And you can see the reference name for the cell you click on by looking just above it in the top left corner in what is called the formula bar. So right here where it says A1, that just tells me what cell that I'm working in. And those cells are identified by the letters in the columns across the top and the numbers in the rows going down the side of the screen. Our formula or function will always begin with an equal sign. And this is what tells Excel that we want it to do something as opposed to just type in information. I'm going to go ahead and click on cell A4, which is this one highlighted in yellow. And I'll click that equal sign to start my formula. And now I need to add in the information. So I'm just going to put cells A1 plus A2 plus A3. And I'll hit enter, and that will calculate that formula that I put in. Now you'll notice that it doesn't really tell me anything because I don't have any numbers in there. But once we have typed that formula, it appears up here in our formula bar so that we can easily review it. We're just going to add some numbers in here to see how Excel is actually calculating. So let's put 5, 10, and 15. And you'll see now Excel is doing the math for me to get to that result of 30. Functions also start with an equal sign. And those are then followed by the pre-programmed command like sum. So instead of typing out this cell plus this cell plus this cell, we're giving Excel a command that tells us what to do. So I'll type that equal sign and sum, and then I need parentheses, which is what helps us define the area that we're going to be calculating. When there's a comma between the cell names, Excel knows to include each cell in the calculation. So I'll do A1, A2, A3 with commas in between, and you'll see that Excel goes ahead and highlights those different cells for me so I can see visually where my formula is referencing. Close parentheses and hit enter, and it calculates. And we can double check that it calculates correctly because we have the same number in both of those. Now, one other option that you have is to use a colon between your cell references in a function. And that lets Excel know to include both the cells that are named at the start and the end and everything in between. Think of the colon as standing for the word through. And let me show you how that works. I'm going to click right here on cell C4, type equals to start my function, do sum. A1, I'm going to put that colon instead of a comma through A3, and you'll see that Excel pulls that whole batch of numbers, close parentheses, hit enter, and once again, we have come up with that same number. And this is just to show you that there are a lot of different ways that you can get to the same information in Excel. As you start working with it and get more comfortable, you'll find the ones that make the most sense to you.
Jamie, just one moment. Is there any way that you could zoom in a little bit? Someone in the chat was saying they're having a hard time seeing.
Let's do that. Awesome. How's that look? Okay. So we've done 3 options of doing that equal sign with the cells plus, 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 with the commas, and also with the colon. One other option that you have is to drag and drop your mouse to highlight your range that you are doing. So I'm going to click right here in D4. I'll say equals sum parentheses, and I'm just going to highlight these numbers. Close parentheses, same option. If you need to, you can also specify a cell or range on another sheet. You do that by typing in a reference to that sheet in addition to the cell name. And I can demonstrate that later on in today's class if we have interest in it. But are there any questions just with the basics of formulas and functions so far?
Say no questions on that so far.
Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the Common Functions tab. And what this shows you here, and let me go ahead and zoom a little bit more so it's a little easier to see. This sheet just shows you some of the common mathematical functions that are available in Excel. So we have things like sum for adding, averaging if we want to calculate the average value in our list of numbers, max and min, which help us find the largest or the lowest values, or even things for counting to count the number of items in a list. We also have some more advanced functions like doing an if function that uses a true false criteria, or even a lookup function to search for a value and return the results from that range. And this is just to give you an idea of the many, many options that you have, but we'll actually walk through some of these in practice on the next few pages. So we're going to move over to our personal budget tab and just start with a very simple formula. I'm going to zoom that just a little bit more. There we go. And I am looking for cell B7. So I'm going to go over here to where it says B in my columns, down to where it says 7, and click on that cell. And I'm going to just do a simple formula of equals B4 plus B5. I will hit enter, and it goes ahead and calculates that result for me. The results of the calculation should appear in your selected cell once you hit enter. To view that formula that you entered, just click on the cell and look right up here at the top in your formula bar, and it will appear. Now, sometimes you may need to change a formula to include additional cells, remove cells, or make other changes. So I notice here that I've got salary A and salary B, but I left off salary C. I can click on this cell here with the formula, then click up here in the formula bar to actually make changes to that formula. And I'm going to go ahead and add plus E6, which will get all three of the salaries that I'm calculating, A, B, and C, which you'll see highlighted in that blue, red, and purple. I hit enter, and the formula updates the calculation for me. Now let's say that I want to use the same formula, but I don't want to have to retype it every single time. I can use what's called the autofill feature to easily apply the formula that I have to other cells. And this is a little bit hard to see, but when I am on cell B7, if I go all the way down to the bottom corner, there's a little darker green square, and when I hover over it, it changes into a little black cross. And that lets me drag the contents over to the other cells that I want to calculate. And when I release that, you'll see that the numbers come across there. Excel will apply the same formula that I already had here in B7, but it will adjust it for the cells that I've moved it to automatically. So let me show you how that looks. Over here, when I click up here in the formula bar so that it highlights, because I moved this over to column C, it's calculating C4, C5, and C6. Same thing over here. In column D, it recognized D4, D5, and D6. And in column E, we've got E4, E5, and E6. And that's a way to save time if I need to use that same formula in many places. Do we have any questions on dragging and dropping just simple formulas? All right, functions are also another way for us to save time. And what functions do is let us perform calculations without having to type all of those long, complex formulas. So if I have maybe more than 3 cells that I want to calculate, I might not want to type out B1 and B2 and B3 and B4 for all 200 cells that I'm calculating. So a function will let me save some time with that. I'm going to go down to cell B15 here in my subtotal, and I'm going to insert a formula. Right across the top of my toolbar here, I've got the Formulas tab. So I will click on Formulas, And then you should see that insert function button. And that's going to be the first button right there on the left-hand side. We'll click on that and it opens up a lovely little wizard for us to figure out what function that we want to use. I'm going to go ahead and just do a sum. I'll click OK. And now it's going to ask me what range of numbers that I would like to calculate. And based on where you put your function in, Excel will make a best guess about where you might want to calculate. Cells B10 to B14 are, in fact, the ones that I want to calculate. So I'm good with that. And I will click OK to display those results. And there we have it. We have that whole function in there without having to type in a long formula. Another option that I have is what's called the auto sum feature, which works if I'm doing just addition. And that's going to be the button up here on your toolbar that is right next to insert function. You've got your auto sum here. When you click on that, it highlights those cells for you that it thinks you want to sum. You're just going to verify, make sure they look good. They do. I can hit enter. And I have my function put in. And I'm just going to use that autofill feature again to do the same thing to the rest of the row. So down in that bottom right corner where my icon turns into that little black cross, drag and drop. And we've filled in that function. Now, so far, we've used formulas and functions to do some simple addition, but we can also use formulas for subtraction too. So let's say that I want to see what my savings are like. So I need to know how my income and expenses compare. To do that, I'm just going to click here in cell B17, do my equal sign to let Excel know that I want to do a formula, and then I'm going to enter cell B7 minus B15. I'll hit enter, and you'll see that Excel has done the math for me. And once again, I'm going to use autofill to drag over and complete that row so I have data across for everything. Do we have any questions so far?
There was one question, and they were asking if you could type it in as A4 plus B4 plus C4 continuously. I think they mean, can they just type it that way simply as opposed to using the formulas function?
Yes, you can do that. Like I said earlier, Excel gives you lots of different ways to do the same thing. So you can use whichever is most comfortable for you. So if it makes more sense to you to type A4 plus B4 plus C4, it's totally okay to do that. You'll get the same results as if you had used a function or auto sum to do that.
Okay, and then we just had one participant who they just want to look at the common function sheets right quick so they can take a photo.
Let me pop back over there.
All right, and then let us know when you've gotten the photo. All right, looks like they got it.
Perfect. Any other questions before we move on?
Let's see here. We have a participant. They were asking the earlier question about doing typing that formula A4 plus B4. If you could show an example of that.
Sure. So I'm going to just drop over here on my personal budget here. And let's say I want to know what my salary A income is across those 4 months. I'll do that equal sign. I'm going to do B4 plus C4 plus D4 plus E4. And you'll see instead of going down, it's going across for me. I'll hit enter and it still calculates for me. Does that help?
All right, they said, wow, thanks. So looks like it did.
Perfect. All right, now we're going to go ahead and move over to our grades tab here. And we're going to play with some different formulas and functions. So the first thing we're going to do is use a sum to add up our list of numbers, which is something we're a little bit familiar with because we've been doing that so far. So I'm just going to click over here in cell B9 and use my sum function. And this time I'm going to type it in. I'm going to do equals sum, open parentheses to start my function. I'm going to highlight the cells from B3 to B7, close parentheses, hit enter, and that calculates that total for me. Not really sure why I would want to do that with grades, but in case you need to know an overall total, that's an easy way to do that. But let's say we want to know what the average is. So out of all these grades, yes.
Amy, could you zoom in real quick? We just,
yes, I am so sorry. Let's zoom that back in. It does not want to hold from one page to the next for me. All right. So we've got our sum from B3 to B7 there. Now we're going to do average in the cell underneath. So to enter that formula, I'm going to type equals. And this time I'm going to type average. And you see as I start typing that Excel likes to provide me with some formulas that it thinks I want to use. I can always click on one of those if that's what I want to do and have it pop up as well. I'm going to open parentheses and I'm going to select that same range from B3 to B7, close parentheses, hit enter. Excel is going to do math magic for me, except for it did a weird thing that it sometimes does, and it calculated it as a date instead of a number. If Excel does that to you, you can go back under your Home tab and you're going to be looking for this little box at the top that says number, and you see here that it says date. I don't actually want this cell to be a date. I can change that back to number. And now Excel is calculating a number for me. Excel will do that sometimes. If you've typed things in, it tries to identify what type of number. So if it looks like a date to it, it might translate it over to a date. Or if it looks like money, it might try and make it money. But this little number box here will let you fix it if it ever does that to you. Now let's do an example of the max function. And this is a function that we use to find the largest value in a list of numbers. So we're going to use it just to find what the largest highest grade is in our list. So in cell B11, I'm going to type equals to start my function. My function this time is going to be max, open parentheses, highlight my range, close parentheses, hit enter, and it returns that max value of 100. And since I have a nice little list, it's really easy for me to double check. Yes, 100 is the highest number that I have in that list. The min function is going to work the same way. It's calculating the minimum or lowest grade. So same thing. We're going to type our equal sign. We'll type min, open parentheses, highlight the range of cells, close parentheses, hit enter. And there our lowest grade is that 75.6. Now let's say that we want to quickly count the number of values in our list. So we want to see how many different grades do I have. And I don't want to have to go 1, 2, 3 and count it manually. I can use a count function to do that for me. So in cell B13, we're just going to do equal sign, count, open parentheses, select that same range, close parentheses, hit enter, and you'll see it counted the number of values that are there. Now, one thing to note with your count function, a count function is only going to count things that are numerical. So if I tried to do the same function with a list of words, and I'll show you, let's do equal count, and I'm going to do the list of my classes and close parentheses. It gives me 0 because it doesn't recognize that those letters are anything. It's trying to count numbers. So what I can do to correct that, if I needed to, is just change this formula up here from count to count A, which is a count all function. So it counts any kind of value, whether that's text or numbers. When I hit enter there, then you'll see it counts that there are 5 different subjects listed. And then the very last function that we're going to show here for now is the round function, which is how you can round a value to a specific number of digits. So right here in cell B16, we're going to enter the function $round. And this one's a little bit different. The first thing I need to choose is what number I'm rounding. So I'm going to click up here on cell B15. Then I need to put in a comma. And here Excel tells me I need to put in the number of digits that I want it rounded to. And I'm just going to round this down to 1. So I'll type 1, close parentheses, hit enter, and it takes my 3.3945 and rounds it to 3.4 for me. Are there any questions on these formulas and functions that we've used?
So one question we have come up for round Y is 1, and what happens if you enter 2?
Okay, so that is just me choosing how many digits I want to round to. So the difference between doing 1 or 2 is going to be how many digits after that decimal point that Excel shows. So if I change this up here from 1, I'm going to backspace and do 2 and hit enter, you'll see that it does 3.39. So that second number that you're putting in is just how many places you want to round to. It's totally your personal preference.
And then we had a couple of questions. One is, can you show the GPA formula? And then I was just going to confirm, because a couple of people wanted to be able to refer back to this. This will be posted to YouTube later. Is that correct?
Yes, this will be posted to YouTube later. You will also get a follow-up email with a direct link to the recording as well. As far as the GPA formula, I did not actually calculate it on this spreadsheet. That was just a number that we dropped in to demonstrate the rounding. So I don't have a formula to show you on that one. Are there any other questions, though?
All right, not at this point, it looks like.
Okay, I'm going to take just a minute to show you some additional functions that you might find useful that are a little more complicated. The first one that I'm going to do is what's called an if function. And an if function uses a set of true and false criteria to return specified results. So for example, I can use that to determine if a grade is passing or failing. To do that, I'm just going to click over here in cell C3. I'm going to do equal sign to start my function. I'm going to do if and open my parentheses. So the first thing that Excel asks me for is that logical test. So what I'm telling it is if this cell right here with my grade, cell B3, is greater than 69, that's my test. I'm going to do a comma and tell it what happens if that's true. So if B3 is greater than 69, if our grade is higher than 69, then that's a passing grade. So I'm going to type in pass. I also have to tell it what to do if that isn't true. So I'll do a comma, and that's where it's going to ask for my value if false. And I'm going to put in fail. Close parentheses, hit enter. And now it's going to tell me a 95 is a passing grade. And I'm just going to drag and drop to put that all the way down so that you can see it. And just to demonstrate how that would work, let's say our history grade was actually a 57.6, and I typed wrong when I was typing. You'll see right over there, it changes that to be a failing grade because it no longer meets the criteria that I set forward. You can also use what is called an Ifs formula, so IFS, if you want to have multiple criteria. Now, this will only work for you if you are using a version of Excel that is 2019 or newer. So if you are working with Excel 2016, this formula isn't going to work for you. But let me show you how that works. I'm going to type up here in cell D3 and enter my ifs function. So type ifs, open parentheses. Once again, I need to refer over here to my grade. That's the cell that I'm testing. And then I need to add all of my criteria. So if that grade is greater than or equal to 90, then I know that's going to be an A. If that cell is greater than or equal to 80, then I know that's going to be a B. If that same cell is greater than or equal to 70, then it's going to be a C. And let's just assume that I work at a school that uses a D as well. Let's say if that's greater than or equal to 60, then it's going to be a D. And then finally, if it's anything less than 60, that's when it's going to be an F. Close my parentheses. So basically what I did here was just tell it several different criteria that it's going to look at. So Excel's going to test that number 95 against all of those things to see which one matches. And it's going to tell me a 95 is an A. If I drag and drop that all the way down, you can see 100 is an A, my 57, yeah, that's an F, my 89 is a B. Let's say that 89 was actually a 79. And you can see that it changes to a C, and it just uses all of those criteria to figure out what I'm telling it. Are there any other questions with the formulas and functions that we've played with here?
We had one question. What is the difference between if and ifs?
The difference is just the number of criteria that you're testing. So an if formula will only test against one thing. I can only say this is true or it's false. The ifs formula with the S lets me include multiple things that I'm testing against, which is where I can have A, B, C, D, etc., and have multiple choices. But they work essentially the same way.
Okay, and then we had one participant that said, can you please highlight / show the formula in D3?
Absolutely. So I'm going to also copy this formula into just the text because it's kind of tiny up here in the formula bar so that you can see it a little bit better. Oops, don't do that. That right there is the entirety of the formula. So it's got that test for A, the test for B, the test for C, the test for D, and then that test for F. And I could keep adding on to that if I wanted to, or I could even shorten that and say that I wanted less of those criteria.
And then we had another question come up. Is the order of the ifs function important?
I have not tried that, to be honest. I've always just typed it in the way that makes sense to me. So let's do a little test and see. And we're going to try just doing this as ifs. B3 is, I'm just going to switch greater than or equal to 80. And we'll do B3 greater than or equal to 90 and see if it behaves itself with just those two. It is important. And I can't give you a very detailed explanation of why, except to say that Excel is going to go in order through those criteria. So because in our revised formula, which I'm going to go ahead and put underneath just so you can see it a little bit better. Excel tested that first. So it checked to see, is B3 greater than 80? Yes, it was. It had an answer, so it didn't need to go any further. So it gave us that result of B, even though I had a second test of if it's greater than or equal to 90, then it would be A. So yes, the order is going to be important. So you want to make sure that you have the first and most important thing that it's testing first. If that comes back false, then it's going to test the second thing. If that comes back false, then it's going to test the third thing.
Okay, and then we had a couple more questions come in. Let's see. It says, can we put in a range in the if formula, like if 95 to 100, then A plus, or if 90 to 95, then A minus?
Let's take a look and see. Yeah. Let's go back and do my if. What I would want to do is greater than 90 and less than 95. Let's see how that works out for us. It does not like that range. Let me try doing it a little bit differently. I would have to do some more playing to get a better answer to that. I can't say off the top of my head if there's a way to get that in there. I think there is, but I need to do a little bit more research on the workaround. So if you want to shoot me an email after today's program, I can take a look into that and send you a better answer than what I can give you right now. And I will drop my email in the chat really quick, just so everybody has access to that. You are more than welcome to send any additional questions that you have from today's class over to that email. And like I said, I will look into them and get you a better answer than I have time to give you right now. Do we have any other questions before we move on now?
So there were a few people who were asking if they had access to this Excel sheet, and I thought I could find the link, but I didn't know if I was mistaken, if I could share that with them. But you might have quicker access to it than me.
All right. So sorry, everybody. I had a few technical difficulties there, so let me get us back up. And where were we with questions?
So I was trying to figure out if I was able to share this actual Excel document, because a few people were asking for that.
The Excel document that we're working with?
Yes.
Yes. Give me just 1 second to pull up a link direct to our Google Drive, and we can definitely do that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and drop a link into the chat. That should connect you directly to our Google folder under adult learning called Digital Skills. And in that Digital Skills folder, you should see the Microsoft Excel. And if it would be helpful, I can go ahead and screen share just to show you what that looks like as well.
Yeah, so it looks like a few would like to see that.
Okay, so let me just switch over this window. So you should, when you click on that link, it should show you the Plano Public Library learning activities. I'm going to click on adult learning. I'm going to look for digital skills. And then there is a Microsoft Excel formulas and functions folder. And right there is going to be the link to our workbook. And when you click on that, all you'll need to do is click this download button in the top right corner, and that will download a copy of the workbook directly to your computer. Let me go ahead and relink. Let's close that. I believe I forgot to switch my chat to attendees. So there we go. Try that link and see if that gets you there. Sorry about that, y'all. All right, I do have a couple more things that I'd like to show you with our advanced functions. So I'm going to switch back over here to my workbook and go over to that chart tab. Excel does have some functions that can help you generate random numbers and look up specific results. And this can be really fun if you're doing something like a raffle that you want to find names for. So let's just take a look at how that might work. But I do need to add some information into my spreadsheet to do that. So I'm going to add a column right before my serial name. And I'll do that up here at the top under Insert. Just do Insert Sheet Columns to add that in. And I am just going to type the numbers 1 through 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to go ahead
Jamie,
and yes.
Jamie, right quick, if you could zoom in, please.
Yes, zooming. We did just an insert column here and put numbers 1 through 5 just to tell me what number each of my serial names are. And this is going to be important so Excel knows what to look for when I do this next formula. So I'm going to move over here just to F2. I'm going to highlight that just so it's easy to see where I am. And the first function I'm going to show you is the Randbetween function. And this function generates a random number within a specified range. So I'm going to do equals Randbetween, parentheses, open. And I know that my list has numbers 1 through 5. So my bottom number is 1, comma, my top number is 5. And that just tells Excel to generate a number between 1 and 5 for me. I'm going to hit enter. and it calculates the results for me. Now, this formula does generate a random number with each change to the worksheet. So if I change this number from 8 to 10, you're going to see that number will just sit there and keep changing. To lock in the results, what I can do is copy that, go over to the next cell and do a paste of values only. And that saves that original number, even if this one keeps changing. Now my lookup function is going to search for a value in a specific row or column range and then return those results from a related range. So in this case, I'm going to use that to find the serial name that matches with the number that I have generated. So right over here in G2, I'm going to enter my lookup function. So I'm going to do equal sign. We'll do lookup, open parentheses. The first thing it's going to ask me for is what I'm looking up. And I'm looking up that number that's here in F2. And then I need to tell it where those numbers match up to. So I'm going to do my comma from A3 to A7 is where that number is coming from. And then from B3 to B7 is where I need that result to come from. And basically what I'm doing is telling Excel, here's where numbers 1 through 5 live, and here's what they mean. When I hit enter, now it tells me that number 4 is equivalent to checks. And let's just make another change to this workbook just to make it change. We'll see it changes. Number 5 is equivalent to Kix cereal. And it just tells me how those things match up. I know we've covered a lot of different things today, and we have had a few technical difficulties. So I want to stop here and ask if there are any final questions or things I haven't covered before we wrap up today.
Let's see. We have someone who asked, please explain lookup one more time.
Okay, so what the lookup function does is it calculates something based on the information that I've put in. So I'm going to go ahead and type that formula all over again. We're going to do my equal sign lookup. And the first thing I need to know is the value that I'm looking up. So that's where I clicked here in cell F2, and it could be anywhere that you're getting your information from. That's the first thing you put in. You're going to put your comma, and then you're going to put in what's called the lookup vector, or the range of cells where you're looking for this number. So I'm going to highlight cells A3 through A7 because that's where I put those numbers in. And then I put another comma, and I need to tell it my results vector, or where do I get the answer from? And that's where my names are over here. I'm going to highlight those corresponding, close parentheses, and enter. And so it tells me right here that number 5 is equivalent to this name of Kix. And you can do this for as many or as few different things. So if you had a list of 300 employees and you wanted to be able to look up a name to your employee number, you could put in, say, I want to look at what number 2 is. Perfect. It's going to tell me that number 2 is Fruit Loops. I want to know what employee number 3 likes to eat. It's going to change that to Frosted Flakes. And it just helps you locate that information without having to scroll all the way through all of your data. Does that help?
So it looks like that did answer their question. And then we have another question It was about someone would like to see how to insert a column again.
Okay, so the insert column function or feature in Excel is going to be up here in your top toolbar. You're going to scroll over to where it says cells, and there's a little insert menu right there. And you can you can insert individual cells, you can insert rows. I just did an insert sheet column, and that adds another column in for me.
Okay, and then we've got a question. Does the Randbetween formula have to be executed before you use the lookup formula?
No, not at all. They are related formulas, but you don't have to use them together. So the Randbetween you only need to use if you're wanting to generate that random number or result. If you just want to do a lookup formula and look up something from a list, you are perfectly welcome to do that and just say, this is my list I want to look from. These are the names I want it to display, and skip the Randbetween altogether.
And then another question we had, is it possible to use these same formulas in Google Sheets?
The majority of the things that we use in Excel can be used in Google Sheets. There are a few exceptions and a few things that are worded just a little bit differently because of how Google has their program set up versus how Microsoft has set up Excel. But for the most part, most of these things are going to translate. And if you are interested in learning more about Google Sheets, on our YouTube page, there is a Google Sheets tutorial that we did either earlier this year or late last year. And we'll also be doing a Google series this summer that will cover some of the functions that you can use in the Google equivalents of the Microsoft products.
And then another question we had, can lookup be a word? Like lookup C3 and generate what number of employee that is?
Let's see if I do a switch of those two things. We'll be doing a lookup, and we're just going to say, I'm going to put that cell there for reference. And yes. So basically what you would do to do that is just switch the order of the information that you're putting into your formula. So instead of telling it to look for the number and tell you the name, you'd be telling it, look at that name first and give me the number. All right, before we go today, I do want to share just a few more resources with you, and then I will hang out for just a minute to answer any last questions that we might have. If you would like to expand your Excel skills, you do have access to LinkedIn Learning, formerly known as lynda.com, with your library card, and you can use their video tutorials to learn more about how to navigate and utilize the various features of Excel. If you would like more one-on-one time and help from our librarians, you can book time, about 30 minutes, to go over your specific questions using our Book a Librarian service. And you can find links to both of those resources on our website, planolibrary.org. Our blog, planolibrarylearns.org, also includes resources like book lists, program recordings, and other useful information. And under the Business and Career tab, you can find a link for technology tools, which includes information about Microsoft Excel and past course recordings and online tutorials. You can also view this program and other programs on our YouTube channel at any time. We do have 2 more classes remaining in this Excel series. Next week, On May 19th at 1 p.m., we will be doing charts, tables, and visualizations. And then the following week, May 26th, we will be covering pivot tables. The link that you used to register for today's course should give you access to those courses as well. And as you leave the program today, please do take a moment to complete our program survey, which should pop up following the program. We do value your feedback and use it to improve the courses that we offer you. Thank you again for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Like I said, I will stay on for just a little bit longer to answer any last questions we might have.
All right. We had a question. Will we be going over, or can you go over Vlookup?
We don't cover that in this particular class. It's a little more advanced than what we're covering today. I am not sure if they will cover it in a future class. Let me take a look at the outline. They should cover it a little bit in the pivot tables course at the end of the series. So that class on May 26th should give you some better information.
Okay, and then we had, looks like a comment pertaining to the last example where someone was saying the value returned for Frosted Flakes is not 1.
It is entirely possible that I messed up what I was doing in the lookup. So let me go ahead and just redo lookup. So we're going to highlight a different cell here, and we're just going to make it green. And this is going to be where we put our number in. We'll do our lookup function for the value of that cell with our names and our numbers. Close parentheses. Well, it's being difficult for me. Oh, because I just typed my own thing wrong. Because I'm actually doing names here. There we go. Okay, when I get everything in the right order. So I changed around. I think that's carrying over from where we were doing previously. So here is in this green box is where I'm typing in my name for my lookup. And here in the box underneath is where it's giving me the number. So Cheerios does equal 1. If I change that to Frosted Flakes, that number should update to 3 for us. And it is not. Okay. I would have to do some additional research on that because it should be calculating automatically for me and is not behaving itself. And I'm not quite sure where that issue is. I'm so sorry about that, y'all.
Okay, and then another question would be, why do we use the R and formula?
We use that just to generate a random result. It's not necessarily something that you use a lot, but people who are doing raffles or trying to pick a random name to make groups or things like that sometimes like to have it automatically find that random number or name without having to draw names out of a hat or something else. It's just an electronic version of drawing a name out of a hat.
So a follow-up question to that was, so it should pick up the random number from computer to computer, right?
And if you were opening it on a different computer when you were working on it, as long as you had that formula in, yes, that should save.